What you are about to hear has never been allowed to be made public. It has never been approved to be presented before any hearing. And once you hear this, there is no turning back. Because, according to Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, Meghan Markle's past contains a particularly sensitive chapter, a chapter that should never have been told publicly. Not debate, not speculation, but a story that doesn't begin with Prince Harry, doesn't begin at the palace gates, but opens on the water, away from the camera lenses, on a yacht, Prince Andrew's yacht, and it is here that things begin to get serious. Sarah Ferguson doesn't just stop at the narrative. She makes a statement with far more far-reaching consequences. According to her, there are documents that are believed to still exist, private correspondence that has never been published, audio recordings that were not made for others to hear, moments preserved in a way that is not easily refuted. Pieces of the past are still there, not gone, just waiting for the right moment. According to Sarah Ferguson, Meghan didn't just appear in Andrew's world. She is believed to have a certain role in it. And that role was once described by a phrase that later began to change the way things were perceived: the first client. If that description is only partially true, then the entire story of Meghan's journey may no longer hold up as it once did. And now Sarah Ferguson says she's preparing a book that is said to reveal things that have never been said about Meghan Markle. Because once you understand what might happen next, everything you ever believed will no longer look the same. Andrew's first client. She wasn't described as a random pick. The language wasn't accidental. This wasn't the vocabulary of gossip. It wasn't the language of romance. It was deliberate expression. And that's what made it so disturbing. Because client wasn't someone who appeared by chance. Not someone who accidentally fell into a situation by chance. The word implied arrangement, understanding, and implicit expectations. It suggested the possibility that something had been exchanged, even if the details were never recorded or spoken publicly. This very phrase rejected the idea that the initial contact between Meghan and Andrew was harmless, or simply coincidental. It reshaped her presence on those yachts as something purposeful, structured, and known in advance. According to Sarah Ferguson, Meghan wasn't just invited as a guest to accompany him to meetings. She was supposedly someone Andrew had noticed very early on, someone he interacted with privately, someone whose role went beyond mere social pleasantries. And it is here that the story begins to take a completely different turn. Because if Meghan was indeed considered Andrew's first client, that suggests not only the beginning of a pattern, not just for Andrew, but for Meghan herself. A moment where approach, intimacy, and opportunity quietly intertwined. For Harry, this way of speaking was nothing short of a mental shock. He had spent years publicly separating himself from Andrew, rejecting everything that his uncle represented. And now, the woman he married, the woman he defended before the world, was being described in language that directly linked her to the trajectory he had always tried to avoid. This wasn't just unpleasant, it was unsettling. Memories could be disputed, motives could be questioned. But when concrete clues emerged, the entire temperature of the story began to shift. Completely. According to Sarah Ferguson, this was the moment when everything became impossible to ignore. She said she had access to private correspondence. These letters are said to have directly linked Meghan to Andrew during their days on the cruise. These weren't ceremonial notes, not social exchanges. They were personal, familiar, written in a tone that suggested intimacy and a shared history. The handwriting played a significant role. The forms of address were also important. As Sarah described them, the letters contained details that only someone who had been there could understand. Small moments, private jokes, references to specific locations on the ship, things that a visiting guest would never know. It wasn't the language of strangers, and when Sarah read those letters, she didn't see them as a coincidence or a misunderstanding. She recognized their meaning, like traces of a connection that she had previously thought existed only in memory. Years passed, and those letters were never published. They were kept, considered, and treated with caution. Because once the papers speak, they don't choose sides. They simply exist. And with those letters, the story crossed a crucial line. It no longer relied on what someone said they had seen, but on what someone said they could hold in their hands. Even so, even with letters, there was always room for denial. Ink can be questioned. The page can be challenged. But voices are different. Voices have the power to change everything. And once those voices appear, the story no longer flows quietly. It begins to hurtle straight towards an inevitable point of impact. According to Sarah Ferguson, the ultimate thing that shatters the illusion of denial is not the narrative, but the recordings. Not the description, not the memory, but the actual recordings of conversations that have been preserved. conversations that were not created to last longer than the moment they were spoken. And in her words, their very existence changes the entire course of the story. The recordings allegedly captured private conversations. Conversations between Prince Andrew and Meghan Markle during their cruises. According to the description, the tone of those conversations sounded quite relaxed, familiar, unguarded. It's the kind of voice people only use when they believe no one else is listening. And it is here that the story is said to have crossed a crucial line. A voice that carries personality, rhythm, emotion, things that are inseparable from the person who owns it. And for Prince Harry, the idea that his wife's voice could exist in private conversations with his uncle was considered extremely difficult to accept. Because when you hear something like that, you're not just hearing a sound. You're hearing history rearranging itself. The existence of the recordings makes this story no longer hypothetical. It's no longer dependent on belief or speculation. It becomes something that can appear at any time. It can be played back. It can be identified. And just knowing that these recordings exist is enough to shake things up. The emotional price, according to many, will be particularly heavy for Prince Harry, because his entire adult identity is built on rejection. Rejection of what he considers hypocrisy. Rejection of deliberate silence. Rejection of the very uncle with whom he has always tried to keep his distance. Harry had repeatedly stated that he didn't want to be involved with Andrew. He drew a line, he stood on the other side, and he left. But according to these statements, the past was supposed to have crossed those lines without his awareness. Imagine that conflict, the woman that Harry defended before the world, and the uncle that he had spent years estranging himself from. Suddenly, they were bound together by a shared past that he had never expected. This wasn't jealousy, not pride, but a feeling of humiliation weighing heavily on loyalty. Because Harry wasn't simply in love with Meghan, he had built his entire public confrontation around protecting her. He believed in her innocence. He positioned himself as a shield, and any shield built from incomplete stories is bound to crack. According to relevant sources, after these reports began to spread, Harry withdrew. He wavered between anger and disbelief, between demanding an explanation and clinging to denial, because accepting that possibility meant facing something even more unpleasant than the feeling of betrayal. It forced him to think that he might just be the final chapter in a story that had begun long before. Within the royal family, violence has never been accidental. When these claims began to spread within close circles, there was no immediate denial. No definitive statement, no public correction. Instead, closed-door meetings took place, calls that never became official statements. The palace understood what was being weighed. The events surrounding Prince Andrew had deeply damaged the image of the monarchy. And linking those stories to Meghan, a woman who had publicly challenged the institution, was not merely embarrassing. It created a systemic risk. Andrew's private world, from the royal perspective, was not simply an awkward matter. It was an image hazard. So the royal response was not confrontation, but restraint. Silence became strategic, because admitting the story could give it validation. Denying it risked provoking further evidence to emerge. And according to Sarah Ferguson, that evidence exists in many forms that the palace cannot control. Behind closed doors, confidence was gradually replaced by anxiety. Not just anxiety about media headlines, but anxiety about other things that might emerge if this story continues to be explored. The monarchy has overcome many challenges, but this challenge threatens to connect too many sensitive chapters at once. And that is why no one is in a hurry to speak out. This is not a story Sarah Ferguson told in a flash. In fact, she had remained silent for years. But when she finally spoke, she didn't hint. She didn't suggest. She made a direct statement that Meghan had had numerous encounters related to Andrew's yacht. And those encounters, according to her, were not accidental. If this is true, it doesn't just add one detail to Meghan's past. It rewrites the starting point of her entire royal journey. And for Harry, a man who has spent his life separating himself from Andrew's shadow, the consequences are devastating. Because secrets, when kept by those we trust most, always hurt more deeply. And in this story, the yacht is not just a setting, it is the backdrop. According to Fergie, Andrew's yacht was designed first and foremost for one purpose: privacy. Offshore, away from the press, away from prying eyes. There, the usual rules no longer apply. Title fades. Boundaries soften. And what happens on board is kept on board. These aren't short trips. but repeated, carefully chosen vacations. Spaces where those in power can relax without fear of being observed. Champagne is always available. Long conversations. Everything becomes more relaxed, and relationships are formed gradually, away from the public eye. According to Sarah Ferguson, Meghan is no stranger to that world. She wasn't someone who appeared once and then disappeared. She returned, became familiar, became someone who understood how that floating world worked. That's why the yacht became important, because it helps explain how the intimacy formed, why the repetition happened, and how a character could exist in the royal shadows for so long before the public knew their name. Once that door opened, the story didn't slow down, because what happened next was no longer memory or rumor. It was about language, to intention, and to a single sentence that changed everything. First customer. But the most disturbing thing in this story is not what has been revealed, but what has yet to appear. According to Sarah Ferguson, there are still letters that the public has never read. There are still recordings that the world has never heard. Unpublished evidence, not because it is weak, but because it carries too much weight. And at the heart of it all is still that yacht, a ship that once drifted silently on the water, carrying laughter, moments, and secrets no one thought they would still matter after so many years. A place where reputation was loosened, intentions were spoken in whispers, and history quietly turned in a different direction without anyone noticing. Prince Harry once believed he had left the past behind when he left the palace. But the past does not respect distance. It waits, and then it returns. Sometimes it returns with names that you would never think would be mentioned together. Whether these statements are fully clarified or not, whether they remain hidden forever or are revealed one day, one thing is undeniable. The story of Meghan may not have begun in the place where the world is led to believe. And if that yacht could speak, if the silent decks and secluded cabins could recount what they witnessed, then this story is not the end. This is only the beginning, because the past doesn't disappear when you walk away. It stays behind, and sometimes it silently follows you. If you feel this story still has many gaps, please share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to follow further analyses, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Love you all so much.